what I wanted to check, because if it's consistency through the plan, then
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Morena koutou. We'll make a start and get back into it this morning, and we've got the Cocoa Ridge team, and overnight we have read the legal submissions and the summary. So in terms of efficiency, just the absolute key highlights or any particular points, and then we'll go into questions.
Perfect. So Mr. Allen is going to speak to you about his summary of evidence and also the panel's questions yesterday around the scope and changes to the MDR. So I'll hand over to Mr. Allen.
Cool.
And take you through.
Thank you.
Elements.
And as succinct as possible, please, because we have read the summary.
Sure.
And you said, yep, thank you.
Just before I go into that, I had a couple of reflections on the comments you asked yesterday. Can I cover those off? We talked about stormwater, and I probably felt it might have been overly optimistic applying the Cocoa Ridge scenario, which is low density, to the medium density and high density on the other side. And knowing a little bit about stormwater, I think probably ground surface won't kind of make it some of these more sensible solutions there. I found Alan Hopkins at the council very helpful getting his approval up front on those things from experience. Otherwise you just end up with consent variations and around the surface. And the other point that was talked about was in terms of density. This is with respect to Corona Trust, and there's a question of all the houses, and if there were more houses on the top of the escarpment, would it be perceived as being more dense? So I just did a quick sketch up here of lots 27 to 29 on your whiteboard there, showing this sort of the worst case scenario in both outcomes. So the first one is what's currently permitted in those lots, with building platforms with 4 metre setbacks from the side lots and the south lot. And what that effectively results in is, across those 3 lots, 24 metres of clear space. And then we seem to land and agree that at best they'd be divided in 2 under the current proposed plan change. And so you sketch that out, and you've got a reduced side lot setback of 2 metres. But if you add them all up, you end up with the same amount of clear viewpoint, but a more diffused and interested roofline, effectively. It's a shame Dave's not here. He'd probably say that he'd prefer the outcome under the plan change than what's currently there. But it's just my view now. So,
Taken as very much that.
Right, my evidence. I think you know my name now. While I'm technically a lay witness, I'm qualified.
And we have read it.
All right, okay.
So we've read every word. It's more just
right.
What are the key factors you'd like us to know would be
rightio.
Very helpful.
Okay. I think we're happy with the movements in terms of getting the 108 lots corrected in the 300 square metres, and that's still very low density housing. And we've made, in terms of the changes, we'd like to review some more final document. So we're really straight into Corona Trust in terms of comments. Sorry.
200 square metres.
Well,
no, not now.
Okay.
I'm going to come back to the question that Mr Munro raised about increasing the density later. If I go through my evidence, then we come back to those.
Perfect.
That's right?
Yep.
So, Corona Trust, we've clarified about where the area in contention is. It was agreed between the planners, and I've described the site, and the issues I've outlined, which privacy and shading, which also equals outlook, and we addressed the density just before. Not kind of MPS UD6 was covered. I did, in terms of the existing covenant, that is a private agreement. I think we need to make that point. It's binding on both parties and other parties as well. It's staying, I think is the short answer. And it's pretty comprehensive, works pretty well. Where are we up to? So I'm getting up to 19, paragraph 19, I think. We're flying through. Yes, so I think the point here is a wee bit of hypocrisy on terms of Corona Trust on the one hand, seeking to impose rules on how we develop our land, and then in the next breath ignoring all the evidence they've put in front of you and saying, oh, there's nothing to see here, can you, in the environment, take away the building restriction area in the Environment Court. So just reiterate that. And again, I think, so there were some questions about how MPS 6 applies, so I think we move on to, well, what does the actual evidence, the facts on the ground tell us? So I'd like to spend a little bit of time here on Appendix 2, not the first section, which is taken as read, and I will leave with you to deal with, but the second section, which starts paragraph 3 of Appendix 2, which is, so I tried to reconcile the cross sections between Mr. Compton Moen and Miss Magini, sorry. And so this comes out in the drawings. So I've made a few comments in paragraph 4, but I talked to them on the drawings, I think. And the first one we should have a look at is this drawing here, which is actually depends how they've been stapled together. And so this provides the plan view of Miss Magini's cross sections. And I think the points of note here, which I've tried to draw out, is the varying width of the setback from the terrace edge by the green bit, and the green bit's the area in consideration, and the orange bit, while still a shared boundary, has been excluded from the scope by the planners. So I won't go into any further there. Why? But
so just so I'm clear, the green bit there,
yes,
only because there's not a legend, is that the Corona Trust land?
No, it also covers the setback of 4
metres. The boundaries under it.
Yeah, sorry, I was just...
Yep, and that's the area of concern. So that's with the 2 metre setback that you
That's
want?
a 4 metre setback there. This drawing shows what's the receiving environment, I think we're describing it as. So this is what when you visit the site, this is what you'll see in terms of subdivision. And then, so the other element in here, which is why there's some confusion about vertical exaggeration, was that Ms Magini has a consented building platform in a cross-section. I wasn't aware of that. We can't find a record of it in the plans, but it doesn't really matter, because if it's not consented, it can be built as of right under the current large lot residential plant rules. So what sort of mistake it was, I'm not sure, or if it is a mistake. But anyway, it was put there by Ms Magini. So we go to her cross sections, which is that drawing there. And I've just highlighted the corrections and some clarification. So her cross section A is really the receiving environment. And so we note that the distance to the boundary is 60 metres plus whatever setback is determined, whether currently it's 4 metres, so it's 64 metres to the building platform. And the other thing to note in terms of the receiving environment is that the consented building platform on the Corona land can, as of right, build a house of 8 metres high. There's no limitation within the private agreement on the height levels of land on the Corona land, of houses on the Corona land. Only only on the Cocoa Ridge land. So I've extended the height. And so then we can see the sight lines, and I think, and it broadly aligns to, I did refer to it, one of Mr. Compton-Moen's cross sections. They're pretty much, they're not dissimilar, except for we weren't aware of the new building or potential building on the Corona Trust land. So that's the receiving environment, and I think if you do that, then in terms of that cross section, it matches one of Mr. Compton-Moen's cross sections. Do you want me to wait so you can find that one, or are you happy just to accept that?
Oh, we can go back and
Yeah.
look across.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
my understanding is you've used his as a base.
No. These drawings are Miss Magini's.
Oh, of course.
Sorry, this is
Yes.
Miss Magini's drawings, which
Because these are the other way. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, one of them's done it left to right, one of them's done it right to left,
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
sorry about that. But that's the.
Mr. Jennings.
Yes, but I think when you do that, they're like for like. They're not dissimilar, and that's the worst example, and that takes you on to lot. Which one lot? It was lot. I have to refer back to my evidence. It's either 27 or 28. Again, they're probably pretty similar, but it's one of those two. So then we look at what the proposed LDR precinct would mean in terms of this cross section. And we had to make another change because Ms. Magini has overstated the height of the building, which is limited to 5.5 metres on the Cocoa Ridge land. But what you can see comes into play now, so this is a 2 metre setback from the property boundary, is that the height in relation to boundary rule comes into play. And so it just so happens that the effective height at 4 metres back is roughly 5.5 metres. So the height and the distance are pretty equivalent. And I think that then results in, confirms what Mr. Compton-Moen's saying, is that you can't tell. He was just considering a wall, the same structure moving forward. When you actually take into account the height into relation to boundary recession plane rule, it's indiscernible, the difference. And so I think that's where I want to leave that. It really is indiscernible. So then we go to the last drawing, which is when I thought a little bit more deeply about how, as a house builder and designer, I would go about maximising utility of the site, perhaps, as some of the various options between a 4 metre setback and a 2 metre setback. And so this is annexure 3, which is this drawing here. And so the first drawing, and I think is, if I had a 4 metre setback and a 5.5 metre height limit, I would be drawn, or it would encourage me to maximise the views out towards the south and Remarkables through large feature windows and it's a kind of monoplane, monopitch roof design, with that part of the house, whether it's bedrooms or living or family room or something, facing south and enjoying those views. And then what I've done is I've pushed, so this is all dimensionally, so these are relatively correct and dimensionally correct between each other, so it all lines down and across, which is why I've kept the grid line on there, so you can sort of see that they're all as representative and as correct. So this would leave a view, once the terrace escarpment's in place from Corona Trust land, of quite a large block of windows. And while they're up high, they might be perceived as people being behind them, overlooking and some of the issues that have been raised. And that's an entirely valid design response under the current rules. If the setback's reduced to 2 metres, you then have the option of creating more internal space, but you end up with a roof line because of the recession plane. And so that's what's shown in this bottom drawing. And again, if you then push this across to a perspective looking to the north from the Corona Trust land, what you're going to see is a little bit of windows, maybe a gutter and a roof that's in a recession plane and a recessive colour required by the covenant. So it's quite a softer view, I think, is what I would. And again, that's a valid response. And in fact, we ended up looking at those rules a bit more closely for a matter we're going to discuss later. And you'd actually be able to push that building. The eaves don't count in terms of their height in relation to boundary, so you could probably push it over another 400 mil closer to the boundary. But it would not make any material difference to the point I'm making. So then, I believe that gets me to the end and just my conclusions. Am I allowed to read those out?
Yes,
Yeah.
go for it if that's what you want to, and because we'll have some various questions.
Yes,
so.
yeah. So in my reading and understanding experience, the MPS Urban Design Policy 6B3 requires the effects of the planned urban form is excluded from consideration as an adverse effect. Nevertheless, if visual assessment evidence is to be considered, I prefer the high quality and accurate evidence of Mr Compton Moen over the erroneous evidence of Ms Mulganini. Based on Mr Compton Moen's assessment of the significance of the visual effects and Mr Devlin's planning assessment, there is no need to amend the standard LDR precinct setback of 2 metres for lots 27 to 30, prescribe a minimum lot width or codify within the plan change the private covenant. Further, I reiterate my request that the panel provides an opportunity for submitters to check any errors and omissions in the final draft plan provisions, because there is no right of appeal available by which to correct errors. I'm happy to take questions.
That last one's a legal point with legal counsel, but the process is we have to do a draft. So you will get a draft, everyone will get it, for technical comment.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
Now you need to talk about the scope change.
Okay, shall we do questions?
Mr Allen just hasn't addressed you on the medium density
Oh,
question.
yes,
thank you. Do you want me to cover that first, or you want to do the questions on this and close it out?
We'll come up with questions, so you may as well give it to us first, and you may circumvent some questions.
Okay.
So if you just bring up the diagram that we package that we provided yesterday, that'll just inform your conversation as Mr Allen leads you round the subdivision. And
again, as succinct as
yes.
practicable.
So I think probably the easiest way to deal with it, Tim, is if we just if we split it into a discussion about 2 parts. We're proposing a different arrangement for lots 30 to 27.
Yes.
So perhaps if you lead off and talk about medium density without discussing that corner, and then we talk about that corner separately. So everything that Mr Allen discusses around medium density, we're not proposing that necessarily for 30 to 27.
Right.
Yeah, and this is a topic that we can...
27th there, okay,
so,
right.
Yeah. Yes, Mr Allen's an accountant by trade, I'm a lawyer, I don't do numbers, or sequences, apparently.
Right.
So the other thing that would be helpful for the site visit, because we can pick this up during your site visit today, would be to bring this diagram with you. There is a signboard with a similar profile. The other thing that would be helpful on the site visit would be the cross sections that Mr Allen has just led you through, because you'll be able to see those on the ground as you're observing the site. So, Tim, if you can just talk about the medium density topic. And I think the most helpful thing to talk about first would be the infrastructure constraints.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so this leads on from Mr Munro's question yesterday regarding more density for the Cocoa Ridge land site H2, or why that hasn't been achieved. I think our view is that we wanted more density in the site, and that was certainly our initial request to the council, and part of all the initial consultation. Council initially came back and said, "Oh, we're thinking 38, sorry, is the right number for the entire site." And we said that can't be right. We can do 37 anyway, which we've proven we're doing it. They said, "Oh, 60." We said, "Well, still that's half what's everywhere else." So we're now at 108. And so now we're really talking about, well, is there any way we can fine-tune the rules to help maybe get a wee bit more density in the right places within the site? And so I think if we're talking about bespoke rules, I think we'd have to be lot specific, because there's obviously sensitivities around some, current owners and their expectations, and there's also the reality of a whole lot of infrastructure constraints which are now in place, because we did some speculative investment in in-ground infrastructure, and that capacity is limited, and to be honest, I don't know what those limitations are, and some of them are outside the site in terms of water pressures and things like that, which have to be dealt with by the council. So I came up with some things that we thought could help facilitate additional housing in the area, and there's a lot you'd have to look further in terms of medium density rules that apply to this area, but we're still constrained by the 5.5, so we think the best way is just to make some little rules that would get us near medium density housing, but we're not going to achieve it because we can't go 3 stories for a start. We can't really go 2. So, so anyway, my thoughts were, so we're looking at bespoke rules for lots 1, 2, 9, 17, and these ones in the middle, 17, 18, 21, 22, 25, and then lots 31 to 36.
So,
We'll provide perhaps a summary of this for you, but in essence we're looking at these 2 lots here, that block there and that block there, but not 37 because that's too steep. We just don't think it's realistic. So that's 14 of the 37 lots. And the way we'd see it being facilitated is that if we were allowed to do effectively a 0 lot, which in terms of the plan definition would be a 0 internal boundary within those areas, provided they're owned by the same people. We've worded a clause that I think fits into the plan change that would achieve that, and that would enable, for example, the lots 31 to 35, and you'll see this on site, that very little of those sites can actually be built on because of the highway setback. You've got a 25 metres and you've got a big bund there obviously as well, and then you've got a road setback. But that would enable duplexes to be sensibly, or even 3 units to be sensibly put on those houses. So that would get you, that'd be an easy way to get some increased density there, and by doing duplexes then you sort of, I think that's a pretty good outcome along there. They'd work well. Lots, and similarly there's options for that on lot 1 and potentially lot 9, and we'll come back to there's a few controls we want to put around some of this stuff. The block in the middle, that's always where we, in our initial plans, believe the density should go, as it's the most sensitive part, or least sensitive part, best place for it. And so the same rules there, but I think you'd get more than duplexes there. You might get buildings that look like large houses that might have 3 or 4 units in them. So they'll have a residential, and a suburban residential feel, but might be multi-unit buildings. I can't really say any more overnight, But what we can say is on lot 1, which is what I've shared with you, is that we would like the rules to facilitate something like that there, which meets, and that sits, and you'll see it sits into a very steep escarpment, and it would nestle in there, be unintrusive, but it would be a good outcome. And that's just 8 units there. So that's what this sort of rule would have to, if you agree in principle if that's something we should look at, then we could obviously have a more thorough look at the entire rules and make sure they would work. But we had a quick think about what else would need to happen, and my computer keeps going to sleep. And so, to me, we're obviously going to have to allow for unit titles and body corporates and more than one residential unit on these lots, some sort of subdivision, and enable ownership to change to new owners. And the lot size, we would like 200 to be down to 200 square metres, but I'm not sure you've got the scope to do that. But I did submit that it should be 250, so that would help. It's already at 300 now, but every little bit helps in terms of getting this density in there, if that's what's considered appropriate. We'd need to increase the site coverage, probably just for the middle block, that's the 17, 18, 21, 22, 25, to 45%, which is the same as the NDR rule elsewhere, to achieve, but, you know, given that we can't go up, we're going to have to go out. And the maximum number, which is currently 108, it's a bit of a guess, but I thought 140 might be the outcome, so it might be an extra 32 is the best. That'd be the best outcome. I'm not maybe a better way to do it is to say it's 108, but anything over that's restricted discretionary is another way to skin the cat. That's the sort of thinking we'd have to sort of troll through the rules, you know, which we couldn't do overnight. But that's the sort of thinking we'd come to there. In terms of lot 30, you know, I think at a high level everyone thinks it's a big site and can be subdivided. The reality is it's a triangle, and there's actually a very small building site on it currently. And the minute you go away from the grandfathered large lot residential rules, we've currently got a 6 metre setback from the state highway in terms of that building restriction area. It bounces back to 25, so you actually end up with even smaller. So it's a bit of a perverse outcome. And I hope to take the opportunity to look at what we've done out there, because that 6 metres was granted on the basis of plans which we've now delivered, and you can physically see the outcome. And I'm pretty confident you would agree to reduce that on that site, the building restriction area from 25 metres back to at least 6 metres, possibly even 2 metres. I think you'll see, when you see the site, you'll think, well, why is it here? The highway at that point is in deep, deep cut as it approaches the bridge. So it's maybe 10, 15 metres below the site. So, you know, there's no noise issues, there's no, but you'll see, I think you'll see that it might sound outrageous in here, but I think on site it will make a lot of sense. And that would enable that site to be probably subdivided into 2. You know, so I'm not proposing that it has this 0 lot rule on it, just that's the only change there. The other one, the other thing I think, and it's really bringing up a point Mr. Brown made, was that I guess in hindsight, the boundary of the whole plan change should have been at the bottom of the escarpment. And I think that would have made addressing a lot of these issues easier, but we are where we are. I'm not sure you can change that, but in terms of our bit of the escarpment between lots 9 and 15, so within those lots there's an escarpment, but Mr. Brown, if you'd infill housing, is concerned it might be on the steep. We've never contemplated that. I'm not adverse. I think, you know, if you want to put a rule on there that stops building, I think that should be done. I think it's just, ideally, I think you should address the entire escarpment, you know, not just our bit, but I suspect that's outside the scope because it's outside the plan area, which is unfortunate. but maybe that'll be picked up in some future plan change. Yeah. So if we follow that, that's that bit of the escarpment that runs through these lots here, 9 to 15, to the extent there's a top, the escarpment runs through there. I think it's particularly important if you accept the 0 lot boundary for lot 9, because that'd be the one that would be at most at risk of spilling over the edge. I think it's the hardest site. But the right thing would be to actually address the entire escarpment. That's what I'd like to see happen, but yeah, if you're going to do it. So those are the points on the bespoke rules. And I believe they're validly in scope, because I raised our initial 156 home SHAR application in my submission. That's submission 103, and we've pursued more density as evident by all our evidence, and trying, but we've been approaching it from trying to get it up to low density, not into the close to medium density. But we've always been a believer that the site was well suited to more density. The council officers in the initial application that was rejected actually approved it. It was the councillors themselves that voted it down, because that was the SHAR rules. So I think it's well thought out, well designed, and we can accommodate some more density if that's what the panel thinks directs to happen, and that's how we think it should happen. The horse is bolted. If you can't just overlay like the medium density rules, that's pointless. We can't build high enough. We can't achieve the minimums. We can't do all sorts of things. So that'd be as good as saying do nothing. Yeah. So that's that point. That's what I'd like to say. I'll close at that point, I think.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Seeing we're on density, maybe we start with Edith for questions.
I only have one question. Why, if we were in the situation of reading the plan change objectives and policies and purpose in a way that supported more density on the land than is currently proposed, why would we exclude lots 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc., etc.? Why would we not just include all of the lots?
Because the horse is bolted.
In what way?
You've got, as you've pointed out, there's multiple owners that have. We're shifting the expectations a long way from what is a low density large.
So if I look out, well, I can't. If I could look through the wall behind us, I could look at the hill behind Queenstown that's just been through a PDP process where the horse was bolted and it's all been rezoned.
Yeah.
Why? What makes this subdivision special from all of the other parts of Queenstown and all of the submitters who I'm sure gave similar sentiments to you, saying, but we've done our bit, we've achieved our vision. Why rezone through a massive exercise that's just happened?
Well, one, you asked us to look at this.
Yep.
Two, as I pointed out, we've been on the back foot trying to get the council to put the objectives of density there.
Yeah.
We've made decisions in the past. You can say what we've invested $10 million in infrastructure in the ground there. Who's going to rip that up now? There's hard constraints. What I'm trying to do is say, hey, let's see what I can get for you. I think you can put it over the entire lot, no problem. It's not going to happen. There's things that make it too hard. So why don't we put it in the right places?
Sure. No, look, first of all, what I'd say is, from your answer, I'd hate for you to think there was any implied challenge or criticism to you or your team at all.
No, that's my frustration.
Yeah,
sure. They're coming through, and I had to take a check yesterday. When you raised that.
Look, that's good. So, for instance, when you were talking about the lots that were in and what was out, I'm very familiar with a developer who will come along and buy, say, 3 lots.
Yes.
And one of those lots might not be developable, but it's really good at counting towards things like a rule on site coverage or open space.
Yeah.
And it lets you effectively put the density where it's best on the site. And when you started talking about, well, this lot may be too steep, this lot you might not put anything on, that might not necessarily be disqualifying from how one in the future might think about the land. And so that was the reason for the question, was just trying to tease out what is it about the lots. But I understand the issues you've raised.
I made those calls based on my experience and my knowledge. I don't think it matters. You could apply these rules to the entire site.
Or we might not.
Or you might not. You know what I mean? But I think that's how I'd do it.
That's how it will be done.
That's
That's
how-
really helpful to at least get us a sense of that. And again, when I look at the lot 1 drawing,
Yeah.
what came up in my mind, and what we see very commonly on complex sites, is some bits that have less buildings or no buildings, and some bits that have a pond, and some bits that have lots and lots of buildings.
Yes.
And were we minded to go there, we would probably be wanting to be as enabling and flexible as we possibly could be.
Right.
And unintentionally creating a gap-toothed smile of what's in and what's out might make a lot of sense in terms of what you see as a real-world outcome, but it might not be as elegant from the point of view of writing a planning framework. So we'll have to think a lot harder about what you've said this morning about how you think it would play out. And it might be that it's so complicated that itself disqualifies it from further consideration, because we've got some pretty mean timeframes.
Yeah. Look.
But I'll leave it there just so you get a sense of what the question was about, and just to say thanks for all the things overnight we've done.
So, I mean, I guess my comment to this, you could put a line through the limitation on the lots and just make it the whole area. I'm not sure. Some of the current owners, you know, and people that haven't been consulted might get a little bit upset with you. But I'm just trying to... we had a lot of debate about what we do with lots 27 to 30, but what we've said... actually, did I cover that?
Only a little bit.
No, I didn't, but I thought, no, we've got enough problems down there, we'll just leave those alone.
Actually, the point...
Yeah, look, I've got a really clear sense of understanding what you've made, so I get it.
The point that you actually didn't make was the no accessory buildings.
The
between
just-
the-
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
There was one point that Mr.
Yeah.
Allen has overlooked in addressing you earlier.
I did think the point was made in terms of accessory buildings.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we felt that with lots 27 to 30 that there's the need for accessory buildings shouldn't go on that area,
So they should
and
be
that
excluded.
and
So
should be
you'd
excluded.
accept a
Exclusion.
no, and
Exclusion, yeah.
you mentioned yesterday that's in the covenant, or
Yes, it is.
it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. But you'd
Well,
accept,
there's limitations. Anything over a metre high, yeah, so effectively.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would accept that.
Yeah. Yes.
Just while we're on it, we spoke. Well, actually, I'll come back to it. But the softening one, the idea of softening with the trees that was in the, I'll call it the existing, but wasn't within the rule framework. Would you accept that too for those lots?
Our view and the evidence that's been presented is that the best way to screen those properties is a hedge on the escarpment edge. And it only needs to be 1.5 metres high, and if it has a little bit of depth, it stops all the overlooking, and you've got to remember where the boundary is back. So potentially there should be a wire fence on the boundary and a hedge on the escarpment edge, and this would all go away. And that's the point I made, and Mr. Skelton has made, is that there was a hedge there, and it's been removed, and now it's refused to be replaced. So it's quite a contrived situation we've got here.
So seeing we've jumped there, and apologies to the panel, I'll just close that one out and then we'll go back to the others on the panel. But before we do, just with the discussion on density and on the accessory buildings, and then we'll come to softening, could you please ask Mr. Devlin to provide ideally, we'll, next week, any potential rule changes or requirements that would reflect what you've just told us.
Be pleased to know Mr. Devlin started drafting that, so.
So the sooner the better,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
ideally, I'm not sure if it's commitments and things, definitely by the end of next week, but
So-
ideally sooner, please.
Just in terms of those ancillary buildings, because we're talking about a building restriction area on the escarpment, that effectively takes all those lots out of ancillary building things as well. So they're all, I think, so we're really talking about most of that south. And you'll see the bit in the middle isn't, and you'll see why it's not required based on what's there.
Now, just back to the planting on the boundaries, and yesterday I alluded to site H1, which is
Yes.
above you,
Yes,
and on this document,
yes,
you show planting on, as I take it, your side of the escarpment.
yes,
So there's a buffer there which reflects what Mr. Lowe talked about, but what you've said as well about the mitigation.
yes.
With that planting there, why did you seek then the 6 metre setback for, from memory, amenity and overlooking on the H2 between the H2 and H1 site?
Well, so the boundary there is, it's pretty hard to explain. It's 2 or 3 metres down the hill from the top of the escarpment. So 6 metres up there is the equivalent of 3 or 4 down the bottom. From the edge. So how do I explain that?
On the site visit.
Or if you like.
I can, I can just quickly draw it. So,
Just under that one.
under that.
Don't rub that off, please, because
Sure.
we'll take a photo and...
So, we've got a cross section, that escarpment, the boundary, is unknown about there. So, your 6 metres gets you back somewhere here.
And what would that somewhere to there be like at the top of the
Here,
scope?
it'll be about 3 metres. And that's both ways, there's people down looking up as well, so, yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
So that it's a balanced outcome, is the short answer.
And to a degree, and I'll take this up with Council, but just to close that one off, sorry, and then I'll stop on these questions. But the first thing is sort of, if there's a setback of one distance in one place for visual amenity, etc., and that sort of overlooking privacy shading type issue,
Yeah.
then how does that relate, and think of this because we'll discuss it shortly, with the position on the MPS? Because if one bit goes, then that one potentially might need to go too. Or are they not analogous?
What do you mean goes?
Yeah, I'm
Well,
not sure.
if you're arguing from an NPS point of view that amenity, and we'll go through this soon, if amenity isn't a factor because of MPS policy 6, but your submission sought a setback on H2 of the 6 metres for amenity, aren't you having your cake and eating it too?
No, we're just being nice. What are you saying? As if
So
we believe-
you're just being nice to whom?
Well, the highway, really. Mr. Allen's probably better to explain the 2 metre, 6 metre.
No,
Issue. Oh,
I
sorry,
don't
down
think
here.
you understand where we're talking.
Oh, right, okay.
Just be clear,
I've made a
we're
mistake. Yeah.
talking about this escarpment here, is
Correct.
6 metres.
Yeah,
So
right.
sorry to leave
Got
it,
it.
councillor.
I'm just saying if
Yeah.
I know what you're
if we're
putting.
asking for a setback here and we're saying amenity,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
but down onto Corona Trust, we're saying, well, wait on here, there's MPS policy 6.
Right, yeah.
Wouldn't it apply to both?
Okay, so
Yes,
what I think,
but-
I agree, and the point is they're equivalent. So the 6 metres up there is a 3 metre setback from the terrace edge. The 2 metre setback on lots 26, up to the 6 metre setback on lot 30 is a range of somewhere in 3.5 metres to 8 metres setback from the terrace edge. This is why I keep keep trying to tie everyone back to the terrace edge. I know it's convenient to write your rules from the cadastral boundary, but the effects arise from the terrace edge.
Yep.
And so they're equivalent. So that's the fact.
Thank you. Now, Gillian.
Sure. Just a couple of questions of clarification. So is all access, vehicular and pedestrian traffic through the single entrance to Cocoa Ridge?
Yes, yep. It was initially the access to the site was off Max's Way, and so that was relinquished and picked up by Corona Trust to enable them to build their homes without upgrading that road. So the home where the sight line is from is actually enabled by Cocoa Ridge, allowing their right of way to go to Cocoa effectively, which is perhaps why it's not the entire boundary we're talking about. It's
We were told
a bit of
yesterday-
background for you.
We were told yesterday there might also be a pedestrian access to the highway,
Yeah.
which is not what you've said now.
Through the bund.
Oh, hang on, you're talking about different places.
You were asking all access was...
There's, sorry, we're
Whether
talking
all
about...
access, both vehicular and pedestrian, was through that entrance onto Stalker Road, or whether you could exit Cocoa Ridge in another way as a pedestrian?
Yes, you can. You will be able to.
So there's public, I'm just looking at the boundaries, I'm just...
Oh, no,
it's not
it
one.
doesn't
Yeah.
exist now,
Yeah.
but
It's visible on the site.
it's possible. We will make it here.
Right. Yeah.
I think I've shown you before, Jeff. But up
Through the
there.
roundabout. Not
At the end of the
cul-de-sac.
cul-de-sac. I'll show.
Not a roundabout.
So that's there. Max's Way is down here, and there was a driveway that ran up into about lot 15, but that's all. You'll see it's all shut down now. So there's no. These sites don't have access to that right of way. We shut all that off.
And what's the distance roughly, and I'm sure we'll see it when we're out on site, between Max's Way and Kahiwi Drive? What's, in terms of onto Stalker Road, what is...
Oh, here.
Yes.
It's a long time now. I think it's about 30 metres. It's about 30 metres at the road intersection, on the road. And then it comes back in. They get as close as 6 metres, but...
So when Corona Trust have done some additional dwellings and this is fully developed at Cocoa Ridge, we have two entrances quite close together with traffic turning off, that's come from State Highway 6 turning across.
But they're quite different. So Kawi Drive is a council road, vested in the council.
Right.
Max's Way is a right-of-way that, under current rules, would allow us 6 or less homes to be accessed off it. So it's a private driveway.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a supplementary on that? And you're talking about putting in pedestrian and cycle access next to lot 31, kind of going through the bund, I presume you're talking about.
Yes.
And I'm just now thinking about the adjacent land, which probably, looking at your boundary, wouldn't be able to access that new cutting through the bund. Is there an opportunity to enable access from the lower terrace up to the road that runs down between 25 and 22?
Which you mean down here?
Yeah.
No. No. Those opportunities were part of our SHAR application, which included priority bus lane, which I see has been picked up, and we had cycleways, footpath access. It was fully integrated. This is been developed as a more traditional subdivision under the rules that were granted to us. So,
And my question is really coming from the mode shift that there's an expectation is going to happen and
but so
ease the ability to access
if
State
you were-
Highway 6
if
that's where the bus lane's going to be.
I know people have put Steed in the bus stop up here. There's a bus stop already down here by the school. And if you do run a bus up there, I think you'll end up with a bus stop right here because it's a good spot for it. Provided which is which would service, I'm not actually convinced this will be, the bus stop up here will probably service over here. These people will come down to the school, or, yeah.
Can you show me where the bus stop is?
Well, there's a bus stop at the school and here. So there's plenty of road width and we've got lots of dead land if it's needed. So,
And not saying that this is all going to have, just kind of exploring that as an option, because, you know, there's a new access way being created and what links could be made to it. So nothing's predetermined.
no, but
No, and your response was good, thanks.
No questions from me, thank you.
And I've asked my questions out of turn. So thank
I still have one more in that case.
One more.
And it goes back to Appendix 2. And I was trying to reconcile your A to N with your notes at the bottom of the page. And I was just wondering whether in there it says specifically Ms Maganine did not recognise both sides are within an urban zone, and that continues. Is that in your opinion, or is that fact, and you've had some discussion with her and there's agreement on those statements?
I think that's got to be my opinion in this case, doesn't it?
I've added that in, but I just wanted.
Sorry, I tried to take out my opinion and say I consider was what
Yeah.
I understand that my limitations here as a lay witness.
No, that's fine. I was just.
I'm allowed strong opinions, but there are considerations.
All good.
So,
No, that's me. Thanks.
is that a fair summation of my spot?
Thank you, Mr. Allen, and thank you for that comprehensive taking us through things. And we'll have a site visit this afternoon, and having that knowledge will mean we can look at it and
Sure.
see things clearly.
Just
so thank you for that.
Good chance. Are you going to the airport afterwards? Just because I have a plane to catch as well.
Yes, we will be. We'll have a car.
Yeah, no, I mean just in terms of timing.
In terms of timing, it will be half an hour.
Right.
Does that
okay.
work for your?
Yes. Yeah, well, I'm keen to pull it forward if it suits you guys.
Unfortunately, bringing it forward's a bit hard for
No,
us,
that's fine.
but it might be someone else could
Yeah,
be there too.
That's fine. I'll be fine. I'm on a 4 o'clock flight.
It's more, the benefit now is we've got a good knowledge.
Yes,
We
yeah.
can just
I
angle
think,
along.
I think it'll all come together when you go on site.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so legal submissions.
Oh, yes, I'm finished.
Again, as I alluded to, we've read them.
Yes.
So just any particular highlights, and then we can go to, and there's not many, but just a few questions that we've got. Most of the questions have gone to the team.
Yes.
So it's wise to be the last one, and
Indeed.
pretty much everything's answered.
Indeed. Look, can I just highlight that at paragraph 2.2 I have made a minor typo in the number of allotments. It's 37, not 27. And then in terms of, I guess, the legal topics, there's just really the jurisdictional issues that I've outlined here. And then I'll run through the brief points on that and then deal with the scope topic that I was asked to address yesterday. So in terms of the jurisdictional issue, we see that as being a proposal from the QLDC that's going to be difficult to implement without causing a jurisdictional problem, and it's actually a practical problem as well. We see that, particularly with the shape of this subdivision, and again it's a topic that can be explored at the site visit, that minimum lot width is going to be very difficult to allow for further subdivision in that area and to increase that density. So because it's popped out of the woodwork at the last minute, we haven't had the opportunity to provide evidence on that point or consider that more fully, but in the round we oppose it because it limits that flexibility of the lot sizes that we were seeking through the submissions. We think that the variation or variability within the subdivision in the future is going to be a really important feature of achieving the density that the panel and the council are wanting. The second element there in the jurisdictional terms is the discussion that I've put in for the NPS. And look, I take your point earlier that we have presented to you that amenity changes and amenity effects are not to be considered, but that doesn't prevent the panel from putting in amenity restrictions or rules that advance it. It's just simply that the change or the difference is something that the panel can't necessarily consider further.
Is it more nuanced than that? If we are to agree with the reading of Policy 6 that you've put to us, it doesn't say we can't consider amenity, it just says it's not an adverse
An effect,
But if there's
yes.
a policy directive, it seems completely still up for grabs.
Yes,
And if there's a required positive effect, I suppose it could be up for grabs. Is that
yes,
right?
yes, that's right.
Okay.
And I guess that sort of feeds in nicely to a point that I did want to make to you, that, look, density is not necessarily an effect in itself, density is a change. And so we see the NPS Policy 6B2 as applying to that as a concept. So the change in density isn't an effect that you can consider, but of course built form is. And we've taken you through our experts' assessment that that built form at that different density isn't going to have any different visual effect. Yeah.
And
In
just
terms
brief,
of the
That's
intensity
an
of
example
it.
of that on the board there.
Yes.
and Mr Lowe's got similar sorts of pictures in
Yes.
his
And
response.
We've landed all on the same conclusion essentially, that density increase isn't going to be an effect, and that's where the Corona Trust submission is in difficulty in my view, because they seem to be resisting the density as a broad topic or a broad observation. So we can see, or Mr Crompton Moen yesterday has said that increasing the density isn't going to change the appearance or the built form or the amenity from his point of view. It will remain less than minor, even if the density goes higher than 108, as you tested with us yesterday. So that really was the essential point to make to you about the NPS.
Just the one other point with the NPS is Policy 6 starts with have particular regard to
Yes.
rather than must.
Yes.
So I do wonder, absolutely, and that discussion was very helpful on the adverse effects part.
Yes.
But the only other question I had for you on Policy 6 was how you see the role of that have particular regard to rather than must or
Yes.
give effect to
Yes.
type language.
Yes, so it is slightly less than the mandatory language we're used to dealing with, but I think it is asking or setting an expectation that priority of consideration is given to those things if you're weighing a variety of factors. So you need to have particular or special regard to those elements. And we're saying, look, no matter how you slice the pie, you can either look at it from an NPS argument point of view or the fact that the effects are less than minor. We say on either assessment, there's no issue to solve. That's really the essence of the legal submissions.
And just with that discussion actually on policy up for grabs,
Yes.
and there is this policy here with maintaining amenity and things, and to my mind, it can be read in the H1, H2 as an example, or as you go down.
Yes.
And Mr Compton Moen accepted yesterday that there's still factors to take into play, landscape, etc., wider ones. You see that that policy can be read in light of NPS Policy 6. It's just when you're looking at that policy, you have to be mindful of the give effect to nature of the NPS.
Yes. Yes. Essentially. So in terms of the scope...
Hold on.
Yes.
Hold on. So let's just play that through.
Yeah.
If we have, and again, if we agree with Policy 6 argument, and to whatever extent of compulsion, and we accept that, broadly speaking, an outcome of this plan variation as part of giving effect to the NPS would need to in some way account for what Policy 6 is talking about. How is it effective and efficient to then still maintain district plan policies talking of, or giving people an impression that things the way they are might be being maintained if that's actually not what a reading of policy 6 would colour it with? Does that not mean those provisions should be rewritten or varied so that maintenance maybe gets somehow recast as part of achieving the changes sought by this, achieve some kind of immunity?
Not sure if I understand your question.
Well, if we've got an NPS direction that's effectively saying maybe things aren't going to be maintained the way they are,
Oh, I see.
how do we justify subordinate district plan policies that say maintain things, that people could read
Yes,
as
yes.
meaning maintain it the way they are?
Yes, that's quite right. I think that comes down to an issue about scale, scale and intensity of effects more than anything else, isn't it? So I think the NPS is really geared at saying intensity is to be
Yes.
disregarded, but
Yes.
perhaps
But that might mean someone loses some of the view they currently enjoy, and they read a
Correct.
district plan policy that says maintain my amenity.
Yes, yes. And so therefore you are looking at recasting, aren't you, the character of the objectives and policies
Okay.
to accommodate that. So
I hadn't actually put that together in my head yesterday when this came up, but
Yes.
as usual, the chair is unsurprisingly one legal step ahead of the rest of us,
The
or 11.
and look, that's something that we can address with the further provisions to come forward from Mr. Devlin.
the one thing to consider with that is scope.
Yes,
And when I looked at that yesterday, you do submit on that policy,
yes,
but not especially on those words.
that's true.
So it's just to check scope with that. But it's something to please have Mr. Devlin include in his package
Yes,
for consideration.
yes.
Thank you.
Can you just bolt onto that for Mr. Devlin, and I'm sure he'll do it anyway, the appropriate section 32AA analysis that might come along with that?
Yes,
And that's for all of those bits.
yes. Perhaps if you could, if there were particular objective numbers that we could refer him to, that would make sure that we're targeting exactly the.
That policy?
Yes.
That policy is, and Mr. Brown will beat me maybe, but I'll see if my paper and brain can work quick enough. And
49.
thank you.
2.
Ms. Woods beat me.
Just ask Mr. Devlin to look for
Look
there
through
might be a comparative one in the subdivision chapter or something too, that
Yes.
as a principle, he should cover off. And I'm sure he knows all the provisions off by heart anyway.
Yes, yes, he did give me that impression.
No, it's the original one, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So, look, we've covered off the two main jurisdictional issues. I think the best use of our time now is to turn to the topic of scope of submissions. Now, we've submitted on two branches, Submission 80 and Submission 103. Submission 103 was made in the name of Mr. Allen and specifically addresses the topic of density and the missed opportunity from previous applications. So that, in combination, means that we think the panel does have a very, very broad scope to enhance the density if it was minded to do so. However, we would submit to you that it's not a simple exercise of lifting and shifting one category to another. So we would say don't simply impose or lift and shift MDR or medium density residential provisions into the Cocoa Ridge land. We say the better answer is to have the H2 area remain as a separate zoning category, but perhaps enhanced with an eye to a medium density outcome.
Hold on.
Yeah.
In my head, you're talking about two issues here.
Yeah.
The first is scope.
Yes.
The second is what's the most appropriate solution.
Yes.
And I don't think you're saying there's only scope to keep H2 with some tweaks.
Correct.
You're saying the scope for something greater than what is currently shown
Yes.
is there,
Yes.
but the submitter's view is that it wouldn't be most appropriate to just bring the medium density suite across.
Correct.
Okay,
That's
I'm following you there.
Yep, that's exactly the submission point. And the reason for that, as alluded to by Mr. Devlin and Mr. Compton-Moen and also Mr. Allen today, is that there has been a line in the sand drawn with the physical infrastructure that has been put in place. So we think enhance or boost the existing H2 zone provisions, and we'll come back to you with precisely what that may look like. Mr. Allen suggested to you this morning that a density of 140 units could be appropriate, but he has some unknowns around the infrastructure constraints with stormwater. The thing that would be very difficult for this site to accommodate is a minimum density rule. That would be very, very awkward because of the infrastructure constraints. We would say leaving it as an enabling provision to enable density to go to 140 is the most appropriate.
And the diverse ownership now.
Yes.
We haven't got control.
We haven't got control of the site.
Yeah,
to the
I think
same
that's the
degree.
more relevant factor.
Yes.
That it's effectively already been subdivided with
Yes.
council agreed grandfathering provisions. And if one of those lots was targeted for one person doing some development, it might be hard for them to
Yeah.
achieve what you might expect of a big greenfield paddock on the northern side. That might be
Yes.
the more
Yeah.
sustainable argument there.
Yes, yes, that's right, which leads to that topic that you addressed with Mr Allen before about, well, why, essentially you were asking why would you tailor the plan change to specific lots within the subdivision, and that's actually part of the answer, is that we've essentially lost control of some of those sites through ownership. The second element to that is, look, it's a site that really favours having those bespoke rules to intensify in the centre component of that subdivision. And Mr Allen's explained to you that that's driven again a little bit by the infrastructure and again a bit by expectations of owners who've purchased in the subdivision to date.
Yes, again, I think you might find support for your argument from the council's actions to date in not proposing that it should all go to the medium density based on distance to bus stops and all the things that's done on the north side because of things like the terraces and the subdivision patterns and what's been done. So you might find there is an argument to support your approach just by looking at why this isn't already proposed to be something more. I could see that in my head being something we could at least accept as a coherent argument.
Yes.
Whether or not we agree is a
Yes.
totally separate
Yes.
question, but
Yep.
but just having an argument that can stand up could possibly work.
Yep.
I can see that.
Yep.
Okay. Look, thank you for doing the extra homework overnight.
Yep. Yeah, look, I think those are the key points. Mr Allen sort of walked you through a couple of the provisions. Look, there are other topics that we would want to propose to you. Things like, as Mr Allen said, the site coverage rule, 45% is workable, but we'd like to come back to you with having given that some more thought. The other topic would be multiple units on site, the rule around controlling how many residential units are on a parcel. That would be useful to come back to you on.
I don't think you need to tell us. I think we've given you an invitation
To do that, yep.
To Douglas to
And then-
think
yeah.
about it,
Okay.
and he can have a think about it.
Mhm.
And as an expert, he'll tell us what he thinks would make sense,
Okay.
and we'll go from there.
And then if he can just do the 32AA
And
Shred
assessment
1.
that goes with that. Yeah.
And ideally
Can we get,
by next Friday.
by next
Yes.
Friday, can we get, based on this discussion, some guidance whether you want just rules over the entire sub-area or...
No. This is your
This
submission.
is ours. We're going
Ah.
to we'll do it.
All we can do is ask questions about
Yes.
does it fit appropriately
Or
into the
not.
framework the
Yes.
council's telling us it wants to achieve. And one question is, are you reaching high enough?
Yes.
If you think you are, you just say we are.
Yes.
If you say I've got it wrong, you say I've got it wrong.
Yeah.
If you think actually maybe you didn't go as hard as your submission let you,
Yeah.
there's an opportunity for you to do something about it, but it's in your hands.
Yes. So look, I guess the concluding point is yesterday you asked specifically what does medium density look like. It looks like an enhanced version of the H2 zone. That's the simple answer. Look, we think you've got scope within that particular provision in submission 80. And then in terms of the submission 103, certainly the concluding comments at page 3 of that attachment give you extremely broad scope to wind density down to, we would say, look, 200 square metres is available to you even though it's not expressly stated within the submission, but it's within range of the 250 that Mr Allen sought. It gives you an extremely broad and flexible framework in which to operate in that zone area, and that's particularly important for the shape of lot 30, really, I suppose, is an obvious example.
All
And
of
lot
them
one,
really.
yeah.
It gives you a diversity of housing.
Yes,
Just keep, you
yes.
know, and that's
And
a
again,
good
Mr.
design outcome.
Devlin can, when he's doing
Yes.
his 32 AA, can also talk about where he's getting scope from
Yes,
for the different bits. And that way he puts the puzzle as the submitter wants it,
Yep.
and then we can consider.
yes,
And so can the council. Then it's clear to everybody, to the
Yes.
council,
yeah.
where do they sit, and then ultimately to us.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that really,
Oh, no, there's one more question
Yeah, no,
coming.
I have one that comes up from the last discussion with Ian, and it's around three waters, but specifically water and sewage. And it's a capacity issue. At the moment, I presume it's going to be vested in council, the infrastructure that you're talking about? And
Yes.
would they
I'm-
not
I-
deal with the capacity issue?
Well, they do and they don't. How do I explain that? They're like other infrastructure providers. They build at the need point. So water pressure is probably the easiest one to explain it. We've got pipe network in there, but pressure is currently low. More houses that get connected, the lower the fire, particularly the hydrant pressure goes. At some stage, someone's going to have to, you know, the council, we've paid them development contributions that cover a pump in the pump shed somewhere, in the well, new wells, and I think you're talking about some tank on Slope Hill that will help with the pressure and those sort of things. So that all has to happen. So at some point you end up with a whole point where you've hit the wall of the capacity because the pressure's too low in your fire hydrant, and you're waiting on the council to invest the money you gave them 5 years ago to put the new pump in. That's how it works. Yeah. So in that moment in time, say no, sorry, there's not enough capacity in the system, even though you've put this plan change in that implies that all that capacity is there.
But is that not an issue that'll apply across the whole zone if they're increasing intensification
Yes.
for everything, and they're going to need
Yes.
to articulate that back
Everyone.
to...
Yeah, everyone has to
To,
provide a study
deal with there.
proving how it's going to get there. We've provided a study that allowed 37 lots. I know if we put it to 100, said we're building 140 there, they would say, no, you need to get in line in terms of capacity for water. We've got to put a new borehole down, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that.
No.
Same story with pump, because the sewage, the wastewater goes down the hill and then is pumped back up the hill, so you have to put more pumps in the pumping station down the bottom. There might be capacity in our pipes, but there's not capacity in the whole network.
No, that answers the assumptions I probably made myself. I live 9 kilometres from the end of the reticulation and know that they recost it, but then they say actually there isn't capacity in, even if we put a line in. So at some point council will need to address that rather than developers.
Well, that's the whole idea of a plan change, that everyone's demands are aggregated and it's known. But when you push comes to a shove, you go plan change, resource consent, engineering acceptance, and then you start your physical works, and then they're signed off. And that's why I suggested earlier on about stormwater that I think you need to hear from the council's chief engineer that he's on board with the infrastructure matters, because they have an underpinning design implication. If you're putting a big, for example, you might be planning to put a building here, and they're going, well, actually we need a retention pond for stormwater coming off Slope Hill somewhere. You know, I don't know what the problem is, but there'll be a problem. Yeah.
And it does leave me with one last question. I'll try and make it the last one. Capacity increases, and you say, we can fit physically 140 dwellings across the... but actually, if the infrastructure is not on the ground, there's no ability for you to do that unless they all have long drops, which probably aren't approved in that area. So there's a constraint there without that infrastructure being in place.
I don't. I mean, as I said, we haven't really evaluated it's only recently we've gone from 60 homes to 108. We haven't done the studies to understand the constraints, but probably the most simplest one to understand is that all the little right-of-ways that are in the cut that you'll see today, the main road's probably okay. I think you're allowed 200 homes off a road of that design, but the right-of-ways are only allowed 6 homes. So they're all too narrow, and not just the formed carriageway, the actual easement width is too narrow. So it's a major undertaking. It's a major undertaking.
So you didn't overbuild with the idea of that capacity being required?
Well, we did,
Yeah.
and we explained that we put in the capacity for 37 lots when we had consent for the 26 at our risk, and there's some level of confusion from various other parties about what we're doing, but it was all on the ground, so we were allowed to do it. And we did. There is naturally capacity in some things for more than what is there, but I don't know where the constraints are, and until the dust settles itself, it's not worth working out.
No, you've gone most of the way to answering my question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just thought if you're interested, given my background with Kaingahora and building homes and affordable homes,